your fuel, depending on your mods, depending on how much boost you're running, and depending on how aggressive of a tune and what type of a tune you're looking for. For a mostly stock Evo, this is probably a fairly moderate type of tune where we've maybe turned the boost up a few pounds, and we're able to run, 6, 7, 8, 9, up to about 11 degrees of timing without knock or without any significant knock. Now, before we go any further, I'd just like to show you, you're probably familiar, if you're familiar with Excel, it can chart things. So if we take timing, for example, and we insert a line graph, we can get an idea of the progression of timing as we progress through our wide open throttle pull. So this can be helpful because it'll help you understand any obvious deficiencies in your tune. As I said, in general, timing will generally start low and ramp up high as the wide open throttle RPM increases, which in general is what we have here. Now, the other thing to note is that if you do have knock along with your log, the knock is going to affect how much timing is actually getting used by the engine, by the ECU. So you'll probably note that timing can at times be hindered by knock. So if you notice some strangeness in the timing curve, it could be because you have knock at that same point in time. We can do the same for wideband just to get an idea of how the chart looks. In this case, like I said, we kind of start on the lean side of the 11.5 mid, and we end up on the rich side. So that's not a bad air fuel map right there. And I believe this was still in the stock turbo at this point, so let's take a look at how boost was looking at that point in time. So it's a little flaky. It doesn't necessarily hold boost too consistently up top, so this might indicate that we have maybe a boost leak, maybe we have a boost controller problem. If we're using the stock ECU to control boost, there could be some headache there that we need to address. And you'll find this pretty typical of a stock turbo. It just can't maintain high levels of boost for very long. Once you pass 5,000–6,000 RPM, it's going to start to taper pretty significantly down to about 21 or 20 pounds. So that's to be expected. But this will give you an idea. If you're logging boost with a 3-bar map sensor, you get an idea of how your boost profile looks. Maybe give you an insight into boost controller problems, wastegate problems, boost leak problems. They should be apparent along with the boost log. The other thing I'll show you while we're here is logging 2x load. We'll give that a line graph. And this line kind of looks similar to what we just looked at when we looked at boost. And that's because load in general does mimic boost and does mimic torque. You'll find that horsepower follows more closely with airflow. So load will peak early when the turbo is spooled up, and if especially in the case of a small turbo where it just can't keep up with the amount of air that the engine can consume, you're going to see load to taper off down towards the end. So you'll find that load and boost follow similar profiles: load, boost, and torque. And we can actually just make a quick new column here. We'll call it load over 10. We'll just give it whatever the value of the load column is divided by 10. We'll just replicate that down to the rest of this log here. And let's log load over 10 side by side with boost. I just held control and hit both columns. And like I said, load and boost follow very similar patterns. So this is another great point to try to identify possible boost leaks. Again, this won't apply to you if you're not logging boost, but hey, it's a great thing to do if you're going to be tuning your car significantly, making a lot of adjustments with boost. But one thing that is important to know is that load is determined by the ECU from the MAF sensor. And the MAF sensor, if you're familiar, is before the turbo. So any air that turbo sucks in is going to be represented as load. That's the only place that it knows at which airflow is coming into the engine. So if you have this turbo, if your turbo is sucking in a ridiculous amount of air and load is significantly high, but that air for some reason or another is not getting into the engine and boost is significantly low, you'll see a big discrepancy in these two curves. They won't match up nicely. You may end up with a boost curve that doesn't follow a load curve, which could indicate a boost leak problem. Because if you recall, the turbo will be taking the air in, it just won't be making it all the way to the engine because of a leak. We've also logged injector duty cycle, so we can take a look at how my thresholds are here. And it looks pretty good at this point. We're not even at 80% injector duty cycle all the way through the pull, and that's great. If you're new to tuning, you definitely want to keep injector duty cycle down. Below 80 is ideal. You start getting above 80, and the injectors start to become static, and the flow pattern starts to be less than ideal. So you'll make the most power out of a set of injectors somewhere in the 80% range in most cases.